My son thought I was senile, until the judge read my final clause out loud. The morning light filters through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the empty chairs where my family used to gather for Sunday breakfast. The silence is deafening, broken only by the steady tick of the antique clock my late husband left me. At 73, I've learned that loneliness has a sound. It's the echo of your own footsteps in a house that once burst with laughter and love. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who see you the least. It's about dignity, respect, and the moment I decided I'd had enough of being invisible in my own life. Before I continue, I want you to know that this channel is dedicated to helping families navigate these difficult situations. If the story resonates with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us reach more families who need to hear these stories, and together, we can make a real difference in people's lives. 3 years ago, my world began to crumble when my husband Robert passed away after 47 years of marriage. We'd built our life together brick by brick, raised 2 children, Michael and Sarah, put them through college, and watched them start their own families. Robert had been my anchor, my best friend, and when he died, I felt like half of me had been buried with him. The grief was overwhelming, but what hurt even more was watching my children's reaction to my loss. Instead of offering comfort, they seemed more concerned about practicalities. Michael, my eldest at 45, worked as a corporate lawyer in the city. Sarah, 3 years younger, was a successful real estate agent with 2 teenagers of her own. Both had inherited their father's sharp mind for business, but somewhere along the way, they'd forgotten the compassion he'd taught them. "Mom, you can't stay in this big house alone," Michael announced just 2 weeks after the funeral, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. "It's not safe. What if something happens to you?" Sarah nodded in agreement, already scrolling through nursing home brochures on her phone. "We found some lovely assisted living facilities. They have activities, meal plans, everything you need." I felt my blood pressure rising as I listened to them plan my life without me. "I'm 70, not dead," I said firmly. "I can take care of myself perfectly well." But they exchanged that look, the one that said they knew better than I did about my own capabilities. It was the first sign of what would become a pattern of dismissing my autonomy. The months that followed were a slow erosion of my independence. Michael hired a housekeeper without asking me, insisting I couldn't manage the cleaning anymore. Sarah began handling my grocery shopping, claiming the heavy bags were too much for me. They installed a medical alert system, changed my locks to digital ones they could monitor, and started making decisions about my doctor appointments without consulting me first. "We're just looking out for you, Mom," Sarah would say whenever I protested. But their version of looking out for me felt more like being managed, controlled, and gradually erased from my own life. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was their problem to solve. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in October. I'd been feeling dizzy that morning and decided to call my doctor to schedule an appointment. When I tried to use my phone, I discovered that Michael had somehow restricted my calling privileges. I could only reach pre-approved numbers, his office, Sarah's cell phone, and emergency services. When I confronted him that evening, he didn't even try to deny it. "Mom, you were calling Dr. Peterson 5 times a day last week. You kept forgetting you'd already made appointments. We had to do something." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. I realized then that they didn't see an intelligent woman going through a difficult adjustment period. They saw a burden, a liability, someone whose judgment could no longer be trusted. That night, I sat in Robert's old chair and made a decision that would change everything. If my children wanted to treat me like I was senile, perhaps it was time to show them just how sharp my mind really was. I began documenting everything. Every conversation, every decision they made without me, every time they spoke about me as if I weren't in the room. I kept detailed notes in a journal hidden in my bedroom, recording dates, times, and exact quotes. I started playing up their perception of my confusion, asking repeated questions, pretending to forget things I'd already told them, acting more helpless than I felt. The cruel irony was that the more I pretended to need help, the less they actually helped me emotionally. They were so focused on managing my physical needs that they never asked how I was coping with grief, loneliness, or the loss of my identity as an independent woman. I became a project to them, not a person. Meanwhile, I began making some changes they didn't know about. I contacted my old friend Eleanor, a retired family attorney who'd handled our estate planning for years. "Eleanor," I said during our lunch meeting, "I need to make some adjustments to my will, and I need your absolute discretion." Over the next several months, we worked together to restructure my entire estate. The process was complicated, but Eleanor walked me through every detail. My children assumed I was too scattered to handle legal matters anymore, so they never suspected that I was spending my afternoons in law offices and bank meetings. The house they were so eager to see me leave was worth $400,000. My savings, investments, and life insurance policies totaled another $350,000. Not a fortune by some standards, but enough to change lives, and enough to teach some valuable lessons about respect and dignity. I also reached out to organizations I'd supported over the years. The local animal shelter where I'd volunteered, the literacy program at the community center, the scholarship fund at our church. I'd always been generous with donations, but now I wanted to do something more meaningful. Sarah's behavior reached a new low when she brought a real estate agent to the house without telling me. I came home from my doctor's appointment to find strangers measuring my living room and discussing property values. "We're just getting a preliminary assessment, Mom," she explained, not even looking ashamed. "For planning purposes." That evening, Michael sat me down for what he called a family meeting. Sarah flanked him like a co-conspirator as he pulled out a folder of documents. "Mom, we found the perfect place for you. Sunset Manor has a waiting list, but they had a cancellation. We need to move quickly." He slid the papers across the table. "We just need your signature." I looked at the admission forms, the financial agreements, the medical authorizations that would essentially sign away my right to make my own decisions. My hands trembled, not from age or confusion, but from rage. "And if I refused to sign?" I asked quietly. Michael's mask slipped for just a moment. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly anymore. If necessary, we can pursue legal guardianship to protect you from yourself." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't seen coming. That night, I called Eleanor. "It's time," I told her. "Let's finalize everything." 6 months later, I began experiencing what appeared to be more serious memory issues. I started forgetting to pay bills, leaving the stove on, getting confused about dates and appointments. Of course, these episodes were carefully staged, but they convinced Michael and Sarah that their fears were justified. They accelerated their plans to move me into Sunset Manor, and I let them believe they were in control. I signed the papers they put in front of me, nodded when they explained how this was for the best, and allowed them to pack up my belongings like I was already gone. The day before I was scheduled to move to the facility, Eleanor called both of my children. "Your mother has asked me to read her updated will to the family," she said formally. "Please come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when they walked into Eleanor's conference room. They expected a routine reading, perhaps some minor adjustments to account for my declining mental state. Michael brought his own lawyer, certain he could challenge anything that didn't make sense. Eleanor opened the leather portfolio with ceremonial gravity. "Margaret has asked me to read this in its entirety," she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades of legal experience. "I, Margaret Rose Hamilton, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and testament. To my children, Michael and Sarah, who have spent the last 3 years treating me as if I were already dead, I leave the following." The color drained from Sarah's face. Michael leaned forward, his lawyer's instincts finally kicking in. "To my son Michael, who hired strangers to manage my home without asking my permission, who restricted my phone calls like I was a child, and who threatened me with legal guardianship when I dared to have my own opinions, I leave my collection of legal textbooks. Perhaps they will teach you the difference between protecting someone and controlling them." Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His own lawyer looked uncomfortable, probably recognizing the thoroughness of the language. "To my daughter Sarah, who brought real estate agents into my home without my knowledge and spoke about my future as if I weren't in the room, I leave my cookbook collection. Maybe you'll learn that a family recipe requires more than just ingredients. It needs love, patience, and respect for those who came before you." Sarah began to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of panic. She was already calculating the financial loss. Eleanor continued reading with steady professionalism. "The remainder of my estate, including my home, savings, investments, and personal belongings, I leave to the following organizations that understand the value of dignity and respect." She listed them one by one. $100,000 to the literacy program where volunteers treat elderly learners with patience and kindness. $75,000 to the animal shelter where I'd seen staff members show more compassion to abandoned pets than my children had shown to their own mother. $150,000 to establish a scholarship fund for students studying geriatric care, with the requirement that recipients demonstrate not just academic excellence but genuine empathy for elderly patients. My house, valued at approximately $400,000, I leave to the Community Housing Trust, with the stipulation that it be converted into a residence for elderly individuals who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. It will be called the Robert Hamilton Home for Dignified Aging, named after the only man who ever truly saw me as an equal partner. The silence in the room was deafening. Michael's face had gone from pale to red to a mottled purple. Sarah was openly sobbing now, but I felt nothing but peace. Eleanor wasn't finished. "Finally, I want my children to understand that this decision was not made in anger, but in clarity. For 3 years, you treated me like a burden, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. You made decisions about my life without including me in the conversation. You saw my grief as senility, my independence as stubbornness, and my desire for dignity as selfishness. I watched my son's hands clench into fists as the full weight of the situation hit him. He was calculating not just the financial loss, but the professional embarrassment of being disinherited by his own mother. This will is legal, binding, and has been reviewed by 3 independent attorneys. I have been evaluated by 2 geriatricians who will testify, if necessary, that I am of completely sound mind. Every conversation, every decision you made without me, every dismissive comment has been documented with dates, times, and witnesses." Michael finally found his voice. "Mom, you can't be serious. This is vindictive. We were trying to help you." I stood up slowly, feeling stronger than I had in years. "Help me? You threatened me with guardianship when I disagreed with you. You brought strangers into my home to value it like a commodity. You treated me like I was already dead." My voice was steady, clear, and completely lucid. "I am not senile, Michael. I never was. I was grieving, adjusting, and trying to maintain some dignity in my own life. But you saw weakness where there was strength, confusion where there was clarity." Sarah looked up at me through her tears. "But we're family. Blood is supposed to mean something." "Blood does mean something," I replied. "It means you had every advantage in understanding who I really was. But you chose to see what was convenient for you instead of what was real. These organizations I'm supporting, they see people like me as human beings worthy of respect. You saw me as a problem to be solved." Eleanor closed the portfolio. "The will is filed with the county clerk. All financial accounts have been transferred. The house deed has been changed. This is final and legal. The aftermath was brutal but necessary." Michael hired 3 different attorneys to challenge the will, but Eleanor had done her work too well. Every document was in order, every evaluation confirmed my mental competency, and my detailed journals provided evidence of their treatment toward me. Sarah tried a different approach, showing up at my new apartment with flowers and apologies. "Mom, we can work this out. We made mistakes, but we love you." But I'd heard those words before, always followed by more decisions made without me, more assumptions about my capabilities. "Love isn't something you say, Sarah," I told her. "It's something you do. For 3 years, your actions told me exactly how you felt." The local newspaper picked up the story when the house officially transferred to the Community Housing Trust. "Local woman leaves fortune to charity after family mistreatment" made the front page of the Metro section. I gave one interview, speaking clearly and articulately about dignity, respect, and the difference between helping someone and controlling them. The interview went viral online, shared by thousands of elderly people who recognized their own experiences in my story. I received hundreds of letters from families going through similar situations, both from adult children who realized they'd been making the same mistakes, and from parents who felt inspired to take back control of their own lives. 6 months later, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Robert Hamilton Home for Dignified Aging. The mayor spoke about the importance of treating our elderly citizens with respect. The director of the Community Housing Trust thanked me for creating a place where older adults could maintain their independence while receiving appropriate support. As I watched them break ground on what had once been my family home, I felt my husband's presence beside me. He would have been proud, not just of the donation, but of my decision to demand the respect I deserved. Michael and Sarah were not at the ceremony. I'd heard through mutual friends that Michael's law firm had asked him to take a leave of absence after the story became public. Apparently, having a reputation for mistreating your own elderly mother wasn't good for business in elder law. Sarah had lost several real estate clients who felt uncomfortable working with someone who tried to force her mother into a nursing home against her will. I don't feel sorry for them. Consequences have a way of teaching lessons that words never could. The most rewarding part of this entire experience has been the letters I continue to receive. Adult children write to tell me they've changed how they communicate with their aging parents, involving them in decisions instead of making assumptions about their capabilities. Elderly people write to say my story gave them courage to speak up when their own families started treating them like children. One letter particularly touched me. It was from a 78-year-old man whose daughter had been trying to force him to sell his farm. After reading my story, he'd hired his own attorney and made it clear that he would make his own decisions about his future. "You showed me it's never too late to demand respect," he wrote. "Thank you for proving that age doesn't equal incompetence. Today, I live in a comfortable apartment downtown, within walking distance of the library, the community center, and Eleanor's law office. I volunteer 3 days a week, helping other elderly people navigate legal and financial decisions. I've discovered that my experience, while painful, gave me unique insight into the challenges facing our aging population. I'm not bitter about what happened with my children. Bitterness would poison the peace I've worked so hard to find. Instead, I'm grateful for the clarity that came from their treatment of me. It forced me to see the difference between being loved and being managed, between being helped and being controlled. The Robert Hamilton Home opened last month with its first 6 residents, all people whose families had made decisions about their lives without including them. Each resident has their own apartment, access to support services when needed, and most importantly, a voice in how those services are provided. It's exactly what Robert would have wanted. A place where growing older doesn't mean giving up dignity. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my decision, if I miss having a relationship with my children. The honest answer is that I miss the children they used to be, but I don't miss the adults they became. I miss the little boy who used to help me bake cookies and ask thoughtful questions about the world. I miss the little girl who would sit on my lap and listen to stories for hours. But those children grew into adults who saw my worth only in terms of what I could no longer do, rather than celebrating what I still could accomplish. They measured my value by their perception of my limitations rather than recognizing my continuing strengths. The final irony is that by trying to prove I was no longer capable of making my own decisions, they provided me with the motivation to make the most important decision of my life. Their underestimation of my mental capacity allowed me to plan and execute a strategy that required considerable intelligence, foresight, and determination. I am 73 years old. I am sharp, capable, and worthy of respect. I proved that when I needed to, I could outmaneuver 2 successful professionals who thought they knew better than I did about my own life. That's not the action of someone whose judgment can't be trusted. That's the action of someone who refuses to be invisible. To the families watching this story, remember that growing older doesn't mean losing the right to be heard. Age brings wisdom, experience, and perspective that deserve respect, not dismissal. Before you make decisions for the elderly people in your life, make sure you're making decisions with them. And to the elderly viewers who see themselves in my story, remember that it's never too late to demand the dignity you deserve. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. Your life is still your own to live. If this story has affected you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Like and subscribe to help us continue bringing these important family stories to light. Comment below to let us know how this has impacted your own family relationships. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our loved ones is the expectation that they treat us with the respect we've earned through a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and wisdom. I gave my children that gift, even if they were too proud to accept it. My name is Margaret Hamilton, and this is my story of finding my voice when everyone else had decided I'd lost it.